Hi all. Today we're going to talk about the supply curve, and the product that we're having a look at is gasoline. Um, it's a normal necessity, um, not just of consumption, but production as well. The goods that we buy all travel, they're all mobile, and to reach the household, the shops. Um, and so gasoline enters um, the market, economics, pretty much everywhere. But we're focused on the pumps and the consumer filling their car. Today, we're going to look at the producer producing gasoline and their supply curve. Um, and probably the most obvious observation you can make is that for the producer, their supply curve is going to be um, they own a refinery, say, at a depot, and their input, the crude oil price, is going to be a determinant of their supply. The higher the price of crude oil, um, uh, the less for a given price of gasoline they're going to be willing to supply, and so on. And the two interact with each other. Um, Gasoline hasn't been easy to replace, even though there are a number of issues around gasoline. It's just simply a very efficient form of storing energy, particularly compared to batteries and so on. So we can define the supply function, and we can plot it on a graph. And we know that our supply curve, uh, we have price on the y-axis, quantity on the horizontal axis, the x-axis, and there is an equilibrium price at which the quantity supplied equals the quantity demanded. And from that equilibrium price, we can calculate um, um, consumer surplus, and we can calculate producer surplus, because the marginal price, the equilibrium price at the margin, clearly suppliers would supply um, at a different price, purchasers would buy at a different price, and that gives rise to um, consumer surplus and producer surplus. And the importance, particularly of the consumer surplus, is that obviously to our eyes affects the attention with which government and politicians direct towards the gas price. They know how important this is, not only to the economy, but to sort of consumers' budgets. And if there is going to be intervention to set prices which could give rise to either a shortage or a surplus, we know this is one of those markets that's going to give rise to this. So it's a really good example of the sort of economic tools and economic principles, and makes it very easy to work through and discuss the sort of various economic principles involved. And once you've got your equilibrium price, and you've got your demand function, your supply function firmly in mind, producer surplus, you can be thinking in terms of elasticity formula to get to the slope of a curve at a particular point. And of course, this slope has quite a complicated function because you not only have the gasoline price, you have the crude oil price, but that lets you, once you've got a function established, that lets you, with the aid of a spreadsheet, graph the supply curve and graph intervention prices in a very satisfactory way, and get a deeper, better understanding of the maths and the applicability of the maths to this particular part of economics, which makes for a very nice demonstration, particularly in relation to differentiation. We can take the derivative with respect to price to find the slope, and the constant value means that for every incremental increase in price, quantity supplied, if we're looking at the supply function, will tend to increase. So that's quite a nice demonstration. We can also account for supply shocks. Again, it's not just the sort of headline shocks of the closure of a trade route, either through a ship blocking the Suez Canal has happened, pirates, war, but also acts of nature. I mean, hurricanes are a routine occurrence and routinely disrupt supply. And of course, price shifts accordingly, and that attracts the attention, particularly of politicians, to take action. So we've sort of touched on elasticity and how we can use the derivative of the supply function multiplied by the ratio of price to quantity. We can compare then elasticities at different prices. As at a low price, is the supply curve highly elastic, that if the price is low and producers get a chance to increase production, we can imagine that the supply will be highly elastic. Whereas a sort of movement from a higher price to a slightly higher price would be sort of moderately elastic. And the final market price is what helps us get into our calculation of producer and consumer surplus. So last time we introduced the demand function, so I won't go over that again, and how we can use maths to solve for the equilibrium price. But that's well worth studying and getting the head around, and producing that elegant graph of consumer surplus and producer surplus, with consumer surplus to the north and producer surplus to the south. And once you've settled on your demand and supply curves, right or wrong, they only have to be approximate for the purposes of demonstration, then you can get into varying assumptions and showing how the curves respond. So we've We picked gasoline in particular because the consumer surplus for gasoline is so high. Generally, for luxuries, if you buy a designer watch, for example, for $500, and your maximum willingness to buy was 510, your consumer surplus is absolutely tiny. It's £10. And if the price rises slightly, it's not a necessity. It's not vital to you. You easily walk away from that. For critical commodities like gasoline, tap water, life-saving medications, consumer willingness to pay is really high because there are very few substitutes. And market competition keeps prices relatively low compared to their vital importance. So consumers walk away with that massive surplus, all being well. When we then move into discussions of beyond this to monopoly or cartel, we can see what's at stake in that the monopoly or cartel can shrink that consumer surplus by artificially raising prices, and by the opposite token, a price subsidized by government will expand that consumer surplus and make people feel better about their budget and their daily experience. So consumer surplus is the financial gain or extra benefit a buyer gets when they buy a product for less than the highest price they would have been willing to pay. And at the equilibrium price, there's a whole curve of prices where the individual consumers individually and in the aggregate would have been willing to pay a different price. So I hope that's been helpful on consumer surplus. And its calculation, because this sort of takes us into integration of the supply and demand functions, the calculations are extremely helpful in assessing the efficiency of markets and the potential effects of price discrimination or taxation in particular on consumer welfare. So I hope that's been helpful, and see you next time.